Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
A student makes the adhan, a call to prayer. Millions of Muslims around the world respond to a similar call in order to complete their obligatory prayers. Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world, with a population of 1.5 billion and growing. As Islam spreads around the world, so do the controversies surrounding it.
Fear of Muslims in America continues to threaten worshippers of Islam who have been subjected to a number of recent attacks.
2010 saw a 50% increase in hate crimes against Muslims.
Some of these attacks have specifically targeted Prophet Muhammad, a man whom Muslims considered the final messenger of God.
This video is disgusting and reprehensible.
But who exactly was this man whose character is questioned by many? To answer this question and others related to Islamophobia, we travel to Georgetown University, where we talk to many members of the student body and esteemed faculty members. We also sat down with the Reverend, a Rabbi, and an Imam to get their perspectives on Prophet Muhammad and recent controversies.
In a time of darkness and greed, it is your light that we need. You came to teach us how to live. Muhammad, Ya Rasulallah, you were so caring and kind. Your soul was full of light. You are the best of mankind. Muhammad, khayru khalqillah. Sallu ala Rasulillah, Habib al-Mustafa.
Meet Juman, a senior in the School of Foreign Service studying international politics. She sits down with Father Michael to ask him questions about Prophet Muhammad.
From doing your studies, what are your impressions of the Prophet Muhammad and his character?
Well, of course, everything that we know about the Prophet Muhammad is filtered through the lens of the Islamic community, in the same way that everything that we know about Jesus is filtered through the lens of the Christian community. So, as a scholar, one has to be critical, in the best sense of the term, of all of the sources that we have for religious figures. That being said, I think it's safe to say that the Prophet Muhammad, however one regards him, has been one of the most significant individuals in the history of humanity. Most importantly, what we can say about the Prophet Muhammad is that he is the messenger through whom the Quran was given to humanity. That radically changed the development of human history in ways that one can't even begin to fathom. I mean, when we look at how the world changed as a result of the revelation of the Quran, which came through the Prophet Muhammad, we can't even begin to gauge the impact that has had on the unfolding of human history and culture.
After hearing about the Prophet from Father Michael, we wanted to ask the students within the Muslim community about his impact on their lives.
So, why does someone who died more than 1,000 years ago matter so much to you?
Well, as a Muslim, the example that I look to in terms of like a benchmark for morality, a benchmark for ethics, how I interact with my parents, how I interact with my with my friends, with my enemies, and how I interact with Allah. That's all based upon the example that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said. And so that's the practical reason why.
The Prophet, so from what I know about the Prophet, and the biggest thing I see about the Prophet is that he was so patient. So if someone came up to him with just so many stories about him being abused, or people like throwing rocks at him or trash at him, and no matter what, he always kept calm, and he did this because he wanted to be patient.
He practiced what Allah's preaching to, what Allah teaches everyone, all of mankind. God, Allah, one of his qualities are that he's compassionate, that he's merciful, and that he's patient. And the best way we can be spiritual, be human, created in the image of God, is by practicing those characteristics that the Prophet, peace be upon him, embodied. And if we're not doing that, we have to constantly connect all our actions with those characteristics. If you can't trace it back to that, then don't do it.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
So far, we have heard from a religious figure and Muslim students about the character of Prophet Muhammad. To get a different perspective on his life, we move on to scholars who teach Islamic history at Georgetown University. We had a chance to sit down with a man who was featured in a prominent video about the life of the Prophet.
The life of Muhammad is, even in its details, probably better known than any other major religious figure before modern times.
Professor Vol has been teaching at Georgetown since 1995. He teaches Islamic history and is the Associate Director of the Prince Al-Walid bin Talal Center for Muslim Christian Understanding. We asked him about the Prophet's personality.
The Prophet from the very beginning was someone who was recognized as a person of integrity. Before his prophetic ministry, he was called El-Amin, the honest, the faithful, the reliable. He, in the community in Mecca, was someone who was respected as being not a part of a lot of the local feuds that were going on. And so he was already recognized as a mediator type person. He clearly enjoyed discussing matters of faith and matters of the nature of the universe with his friends, and he was clearly respected by women because even in this really quite a misogynist community of Mecca in the 7th century, among his early followers were important women, and important women were part of his appeal in terms of establishing a community. So I would say in terms of his character as a person, the key characteristics are integrity, honesty, trustworthiness, and openness to varieties of people, and clearly open to different types of people, slaves as well as wealthy merchants, women as well as very macho men who were part of the early community. And this reflects then on what kind of a broad, inclusive personality the Prophet had.
Looking at his legacy from the Muslim perspective, I'd say that the word that comes to mind to me just immediately is he's just. He's a very just person, a very fair person, sort of extremely concerned with people being held accountable only for what they've done and only for their own choices, both religiously and kind of practically and morally, and you're completely unconcerned with someone's wealth, ethnicity, ancestry, status in the world, just totally focused on what people believed, and that they'd be held accountable in this life and in the next life for only their own actions. He had many critics, who accused him of a variety of things, from being insane, from being bewitched, one of the interesting things is they never accused him of being a liar. This is very interesting. I'd say one of the things that maybe, if we want to talk about what do Muslims and non-Muslims agree on when it comes to the Prophet, is they agree that he was very honest. He was an honest person. That was kind of a problem for his opponents in his own lifetime because they were confronted with a paradox, which is they did not believe in his religion. They rejected his message, but they couldn't really say that he was a deceiver, which is why I think they accused him of being possessed or mad, because that sort of explained why he was saying what he was saying. They didn't accuse him of being a liar, which is very interesting.
In Islam, the Prophet Muhammad is understood not only as someone who conveyed the message of God, but also embodied it. And this is referred to as nobility of character. There's a hadith that says the Prophet is saying that he came, that he was sent to fulfill nobility of character. So, on the one hand, that means embodying the message. Not only did he convey the message, but he embodied the message. There's a hadith, in fact, where Aisha, the beloved wife of the Prophet, is speaking about the character of the Prophet, and she says the character of the Prophet is the Quran. And all the values that are in the Quran in terms of justice, in terms of mercy, all the things that we would think of not as nobility of blood, but nobility of character.
وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظَ وَالْعَافِينَ عَنِ النَّاسِ وَاللَّهُ يُحِبُّ الْمُحْسِنِينَ والذين إذا فعلوا فاحشة أو ظلموا أنفسهم ذكروا الله.
Meet Imam Yahya Hindi. He's the Muslim chaplain at Georgetown. He has achieved great success in engaging political leaders in religious discussions. He has also dedicated his life to interfaith dialogue. We had the opportunity to speak with Imam Hindi and hear his scholarly opinion on Prophet Muhammad.
Prophet Muhammad was accepted and loved by all people, Muslims and non-Muslims alike. If you look at, for example, the book ranking the 100 most influential people in human history by Michael Hart. Michael Hart, a non-Muslim, who wanted to study the most influential 100 men in history. Number one for him was Muhammad, because he understood Muhammad to have been a man of peace, a man of law, who came about to introduce a new concept of justice. I mean, so many books were written about the Prophet Muhammad, upon him be peace. The most known book at the moment is called In the Footsteps of the Prophet, written by Tariq Ramadan, and another wonderful book written by Karen Armstrong called Muhammad. And in both cases, one would reveal how the Prophet was not only a prophet revealed to by God and from God, but someone who was loving, caring, embracing, merciful, compassionate human being. He was an amazing father whose kids loved him. He was a wonderful husband whose wives loved him. He was an embracing neighbor. He had so many Jewish neighbors and Christian neighbors, non-Muslim neighbors, who felt that Muhammad was their protector.
But not everyone seems convinced of this image of Muhammad. Recent years saw the rise of Islamophobia in the US. More Americans are at odds with Muslims and Islam now than ever before.
The drama over a threatened Quran burning in Florida continues. In fact, seems to be escalating.
American Muslim leaders say anti-mosque rhetoric is on the rise in the United States.
Anti-Muslim protesters hurl insults and abuse at people attending an Islamic charity fundraiser in Yorba Linda, California.
One of the prime examples of an attack against the Prophet was this video.
Now, this film was purposely dubbed and edited to enrage the Muslim population. In it, the Prophet Muhammad is depicted as a pedophile, a homosexual, a religious phony, a philanderer, a womanizer, and a bloodthirsty dictator.
This video is disgusting and reprehensible. It appears to have a deeply cynical purpose to denigrate a great religion and to provoke rage.
أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا.
Once again, we go to the prayer room to talk to the students about their thoughts on these attacks.
So my two questions, I'll start with the first one. How can we as Muslims defend, not that we have to defend, but how can we defend the image of the Prophet Muhammad, who was the most honorable, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in light of, like I said, of recent events where they try to make him look bad. We all know he's not bad, but how can we as Muslims change that perspective, those who are ignorant?
I think living by example would be the best thing to do, because here, the world we live in, here you just cannot control everything you do. It's difficult, and you cannot criticize, you cannot be critical of certain things, and you cannot be very outspoken.
Definitely second everything that you said, but I think as Muslims we also need to have a very welcoming spirit, so that people feel comfortable enough to ask us questions. Like, I cannot tell you how many times people have randomly come up to me and say, what is that thing you wear in your head? And it's like, I appreciate the fact that they have the courage to come and ask me, like, why I'm wearing a scarf, or what exactly is that scarf, like, is it hijab, like, what is it, what's not, because it gives me an opportunity to explain a specific facet of Islam, but it also allows me to go deeper into it, saying that this is a part of my faith, and if they don't know what Islam is, then I can explain what Islam is to them. So it allows me another opportunity to educate, and through that one interaction, that person can go to another person and say, I met this Muslim girl walking down the street today, and I asked her this, and that person will go tell that story, and it's kind of a chain of events.
I think Aisha is spot on. Like, a lot of times we respond and speak of our Prophet when things are bad or when we're defending his honor. We don't need to be on the defensive. If you are doing a good deed, attribute it to the Prophet, because it's probably what inspired you. And do it like every day. Don't just do it when you are actively defending.
I mean, this may sound really like corny, but just being really awesome or being a good person. Like, you don't see like, no, I mean, like, in all seriousness though, like, you don't see really high achieving Muslims being questioned about their Islam in the same way that, like, because if you can demonstrate high level of effectiveness, competency, achievement, that is the best way to represent the Prophet. You know, you don't see people questioning Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on being a Muslim. Like, you don't see that happening because people know he's a phenomenal basketball player, a great person, blah, blah, blah. You don't see that with a number of other high-achieving Muslims because they've demonstrated, like, wow, you know what, I have to respect that person. And that, I think, is, if we can demonstrate, if we can excel in what we're doing, people aren't going to question us. They'll be like, wow, Muslims are achieving really highly. We have to respect them for who they are. And they're not going to try to defame our Prophet or defame anything, because they're going to be like, Muslims are doing this stuff.
And also, I think we should take pride in our Prophet. Because in this world, you know, we talk about role models a lot, and, you know, we follow, oh, I like to follow this guy as my role model. You know, let's make Prophet, I mean, for a lot of us, he is our role model, but let's make it, you know, a public thing where we're like, I'm doing this because of my Prophet, because he did it this way. And in light of recent events, you know, he has, you know, millions of qualities, but one thing that we can especially magnify in these times is the one about, I don't know, enduring. You know, people are going to say a lot of things about us. People are going to, you know, say terrible things, but it's the Prophet, you know, who got rocks thrown at him and he didn't say anything. You know, he said these people don't know any better. You know, and we should act like that in these times too.
I want to add on top of what Mr. said. I feel like you really hit a point that I think should be emphasized a bit more. In that, what we should do in these times is, when we're faced with all this pressure around us, all this Islamophobia around, especially in the United States, and a lot of us are Americans. You know, like I was born in the South. I'm American born and raised, And when things around the country happen that specifically target Muslim people, it hurts me personally because it's now at home, you know. And I feel like the way we as Muslims here in the United States, if you're coming from abroad or if you're born and raised here, number one thing we should do is emulate the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and emulate his characteristics, specifically how he would react in such a situation in a civilized manner.
Ziad Sakhr translated his words into action with his poem entitled My Belief.
Walking through a crowded place, getting stares from every face. They think I am from outer space, but really I'm from the United States. I wear a headscarf, I have a beard. My parents are Arab and you think I'm weird. I fast, I pray, I volunteer, practicing my faith in constant fear.
Ziad's words reflected the Prophet's teachings of responsibility and civility. However, responses to his poem did not contain the same qualities. As he uploaded his video on YouTube, he received mixed reviews. Hotman25ish said he thinks Muhammad is in hell and that his followers are brainwashed. On the other hand, Muhammad Ismail liked the video and thanked Ziad. Grateful Gumby had a rather interesting suggestion. He asked Ziad to go hang himself. Arab Resistance offers a different piece of advice. He suggests that young Ziad has the false impression of Islam. These comments are hurtful, but one can certainly understand why they appear, as these are the images of Islam that people are used to seeing. So once again, we go back to Imam Hindi to ask him about two of the most controversial topics surrounding Islam: jihad and women's rights.
The Prophet treated women in the best possible way. To start with, he spoke for their liberation. Before the Prophet came about, women were not allowed to inherit. Women were not allowed to own property. Women were not allowed to marry on their own and by their choice. Women were even treated like slaves, often buried alive for being women immediately after birth.
Wait, what? So you're saying that the stereotypes regarding Islam's harsh treatment of women are false? Interesting.
The Prophet of Islam, Muhammad, came about to institutionalize women's right to inheritance, like the man, women's right to testify in the court, women's right to marry as they choose fit, women's right to divorce as they see fit too. The Prophet spoke against that practice of burying women alive before being women. And he also said something that's quite amazing. The Prophet Muhammad said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, how women are shaqa'iq al-rijal. They are the partners of men. This is a revolution. In the 7th century, someone standing up in Arabia in the desert saying that men and women are absolutely shaqa'iq, absolutely partners in the making of the community, in the making of the nation, in the right to pursue education. This is why the Prophet said acquiring knowledge is an obligation upon every female and male. So the Prophet treated women in a way that no other faith and no other community, no ideology has ever given women.
Perhaps the most controversial issue surrounding Islam is jihad. But what exactly does this term mean?
Now, jihad is the Arabic word which means to strive to do good. And it is different from the word qital, which means fight. Yes, Islam, like other religions, believe in people's right to self-defense. Actually, this is not only Islam. Nations, the International Declaration of Human Rights, the international law gives people the right to self-defense. Islam too gives people the right to defend themselves. again, defend themselves, not to act aggressively against other nations, other communities, or other people, and also not to force Islam on others. So people have the right to self-defense, but the word jihad itself has more meanings than one would imagine. Taking care of your neighbor is an act of jihad. Learning and studying is an act of jihad. The doctor in his hospital is performing jihad by taking care of the patients. What the mother does, what the father does, taking care of their children, is an act of jihad. Planting a tree is an act of jihad. Taking care of your cat is an act of jihad. So jihad is every effort you undertake to do good in the world.
So, if Islam's core message is all about spreading peace and good, why do some non-Muslims still view Islam as a threat? And why do some Muslims do things that are contrary to the Prophet's beliefs and teachings? This brings us to the issue of Islam and politics. Professor Brown is an expert on this issue, so we asked him for his opinions regarding this matter.
I mean, things are, obviously, we have to be accurate about what we're speaking about. I mean, the attack on the American consulate in Benghazi was unrelated to the protests and unrelated to the film about the Prophet. This was a terrorist attack carried out by a group that was going to do this and had its own plans. And when we talk about the protests in Cairo, which were, by the way, much, much smaller than the protests during the Egyptian Revolution, the people who actually climbed up on the wall of the embassy and tore down the U.S. flag, you can see their pictures. I mean, they're not Islamists. They're revolutionary youth or something. They're wearing V for Vendetta masks. They're not at all the makeup actually of the crowd below them, which are clearly Islamists. So we have to be very careful on what we're concluding. Are we saying that Muslims get angry when the Prophet's insulted and then they act violently? I don't think that's an accurate assessment. I mean, the places where there were other attacks on embassies, like in Sudan and in Yemen, then you have tremendous youth unemployment. Anywhere from 40 to 50% of the population is under 25 or under 30 years old. Rampant systemic unemployment. That, in any society, is a recipe for urban unrest.
First of all, it's very important to remember that this is not a single episode, if you will. That the reactions that we are seeing in countries where there's a predominantly Muslim population, it's not just about this one video. For centuries, non-Muslims, particularly from the Christian world, have been engaged in defaming the Prophet Muhammad in order to discredit the Quran and thereby all of Islam, in order to bring people into the Christian community, or, and this is perhaps more relevant to last century and our current time, in order to justify the subjugation of the Islamic world. See, if you can prove that Muhammad was a false prophet and therefore all of Islam is false, well, then you have an excuse for the subjugation of these poor, ignorant, barbarian people who need to be taught the ways of the West, quote unquote, and the ways of Christianity. I think that's a motivation of some people, certainly not all people, but it is a motivation for some. Discredit the Prophet, discredit Islam, and therefore use that as an excuse for the military, political, economic, cultural subjugation of the Islamic world. That's been going on for quite some time.
So you think that the violence it's like this pent up anger because of all these?
It's the result of centuries of this, mm-hmm. But it is also, and perhaps even more significantly, must be seen within the context of geopolitics. Mm-hmm. That is the perceived and real aggression of European and the United States of those powers, of their activities in the Islamic world that result in the loss of the lives of Muslims, that have very negative effect on the lives of Muslims. So I think it's important to keep this event within the context of the geopolitics of the second half of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, where Muslims feel that there is an assault from without, from both Europe and the United States.
But how exactly do we bridge the gap of understanding between people of different faiths?
Tonight on 30 Days. A practicing Christian from West Virginia goes to live in the heart of Muslim America.
This video certainly is an example of how this gap can be bridged, so we showed it to our students and asked them what they thought of it. Something interesting came out of their discussion.
I wanted to ask a question really quickly. What's the difference, and this is picking up in the video, what is the difference between condemnation and apologizing? That's a very important issue, because I find sometimes Muslims are apologizing, and that shows that you're taking fault somehow.
If we look at like the German experience, a lot of people say that German culture is very apologetic over like the Holocaust from like 100 years ago, and you still naturally see like the German people still have some sort of guilt about that, even though it wasn't them that did it. It wasn't like necessarily even the majority of their population that did it, but they still feel some sort of apologeticness towards it. So, like, should we be the ones? Should we feel the same thing about that? Like, that's the question that sort of provoked. And like, although it's a minority, you have to sort of accept that those people say that they are Muslims, and technically, if they say they're Muslims, that means they are Muslims. So you have to accept that they are Muslims. So you have to feel some responsibility about it. Your responsibility should be purely for condemning the acts and trying to stop that from happening again.
But like the idea is that they may be Muslim, but the acts were inherently un-Islamic. And I think we have to make that very clear. Like what they did is outside of the fold of Islam. Like no mainstream Muslim would ever like see that and be, this is a demonstration of my faith. And I think we have to make that very clear. Like I cannot say like, and I won't like apologize. Like it's not my faith. Like my God, our God didn't say that this is okay. You know, it's like I don't know. I feel like if we take on that guilt, if we say that this is like our faith and we're sorry, then we're like lying. Like this is not our faith. Like, this is not what God wants of us. So I don't think you can apologize in that way.
We're not going to dispel every hateful opinion. There are going to be people who hate Muslims and hate Islam, just like there are going to be people who hate Jews for being Jews and black people for being black people, and whatever minority group that's the brunt of hatred and vitriol and bigotry. But we shouldn't define or we shouldn't take their stances as motivation for us to act within the confines of who they deem us to be. It's a matter of just doing literally, it's so simple that we just have to worry about what Allah thinks about us. And as cliche as that sounds, and I hate to become to bring spirituality into it, but at the end of the day, we know what we're supposed to do and what we're not supposed to do. And if we don't, then we have the legitimate means by which we can find those answers. If we do that, problem is solved right there. Yes, we're going to have PR blunders, and people are going to make mistakes, and they're going to say things in the name of Islam that are not necessarily within the fold of Islam. But at the end of the day, our responsibility is just to do the very best that we can to have a positive effect on every single human being that we meet. And we can do that simply by doing what we're taught to do, because there's nothing inherently wrong, as you said, with Islam's teachings with regards to being able to live harmoniously with people. So if that's our goal, to live harmoniously with people, and then educate people that we are not violent, terrorist people, then the best way is just to continue to work, not within their confines, but within our confines of what's good and right.
Students had different opinions as to how to reach out to non-Muslims. However, when the time came for action, they all stood together. As Islamophobia hit home, with hateful ads being put up in the New York City subway system, students took actions to prevent these ads from coming to DC. Georgetown sophomore Nabil took the initiative to write a petition to the DC Subway Authority asking them not to put these ads in the nation's capital. The petition gathered support quickly as it reached people in all ends of the country. When asked why they supported the cause, people mentioned how these ads promoted hate and how they were offensive to a particular group of people. Support for this cause came not only from the students, but also from faculty members. Meet Rabbi Rachel, a Jewish chaplain at Georgetown. She's also a member of Rabbis for Human Rights. Let's find out what she thought about these ads.
So I want to put my response to these subway ads into the awful Islamophobic film and behaviors that we've been seeing. I want to put them under the umbrella of this statement: you can't know the heart of a people by its extremities, right? Any people. In every community, in my community, in every community, there are people who are going to do things that do not represent the rest of us. And once we assume that we know the heart of a people by what the extremities are doing, we are making a devastating mistake in any direction. When our extremities do something that we disagree with, we have a responsibility to speak out.
And that is exactly what she did with Rabbis for Human Rights.
This is a movement that was started by Rabbis for Human Rights North America, a movement in response to those horrible subway ads, which says, love your neighbor as yourself, quoting the Torah, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. And then it says, in the choice between love and hate, choose love. Help stop bigotry against our Muslim neighbors. Rabbis for Human Rights North America. These signs, the Rabbis for Human Rights raised money from the Jewish community to place these signs up all over the New York subway system.
Stop with the violence, down with the hate. One day we'll all be free.
When those ads, the negative ads came to DC, the call went out again. The Jewish community raised money within the Jewish community to put these signs up in the Washington, D.C. metro station. They'll be coming out shortly.
Fighting hate speech is an issue that's personal for Rabbi Rachel. When talking about this controversy, she opened up to us and talked a little bit about her own experiences.
As an American Jew, I have been the target of hate speech. It is a profoundly painful thing, surprisingly painful. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. Not true. It's not true. Words create pain. Words engender realities. My experience, even small things can open large wounds. So when I see what's going on in the world right now around this hate speech, it brings me tremendous pain to think about the folks that I know, the good folks that I know, being so deeply wounded by these words.
Take your Sharia and go home! You terrorist lovers! Terrorists! Your hands are bloody! Your money is bloody! Get out! You guys have no belong here! Go from here! Go home! Go home!
It is not a small thing. We cannot let it go unchecked.
After the tragic loss of life of Ambassador Chris Stevens, members of the Muslim community organized a vigil in his remembrance. And it is this event that embodied the ideas discussed by our faculty members.
Assalamu alaikum everybody, thank you for joining us here today. It is our duty to honor the memory of a man who gave his life working for peace.
As we pray for and commemorate Ambassador Chris Stevens and others wrongfully targeted during recent attacks, we must also reflect on our growth as a community of many faiths. From the Holy Quran, Muslims learn that doing righteous deeds is an essential part of our faith. We believe that Prophet Muhammad said, "On every person's joints or small bones, there is charity every day the sun rises." Doing justice between two people is charity. Assisting a man to mount his animal or lifting up his belongings onto it is charity. A good word is charity. Every step you take towards prayer is charity. And removing harmful things from pathways is charity. From this and other lessons of Prophet Muhammad that we as Muslims strive to live by, we know that even the smallest good work is an act of charity that brings a person closer to God.
The following prayer, dear to the hearts of many Catholic Hoyas and students at Jesuit schools, speaks to the attitude espoused by Ambassador Stevens, a perspective that we all must adopt if we hope to continue in our shared mission of building a more cooperative and understanding world. It helps now and then to step back and take a long view. The kingdom is not only beyond our efforts, it is even beyond our vision. We accomplish in our lifetime only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is God's work. Nothing we do is complete, which is a way of saying that the kingdom always lies beyond us.
So we ask that you will graciously point our hearts and our souls and our minds toward you, and that you would give us love for you and the desire and ability to show love to our neighbor all of our days. We pray that you would bring comfort to the family of Ambassador Chris Stevens, and that you would bring peace, a renewed desire for interreligious dialogue, and cooperation to our world.
The self is never born, nor does it ever perish, nor having come into existence, will it again cease to be. It is birthless, eternal, changeless, ever same. It is not slain when the body is killed.
This is what unites us. Our collective experience of grief, our collective experience of hope. This is what keeps us together. As we fight misconceptions of Islam and hate speech regarding any other groups, we must remember the legacy of Prophet Muhammad, a man who preached love and peace for the people of the world.
In a time of darkness and greed, it is your light that we need. You came to teach us how to live. Muhammad, Ya Rasulallah, you were so caring and kind. Your soul was full of light. You are the best of mankind. Muhammad, khayru khalqillah.
Like, my name is Jumon, and yeah, ready? It's fine, it's fine. You have to get out of the way.
Okay, don't.
Alright.
Okay.
Be angry and.
That was amazing!
You're doing a great job, keep going!
From luxury you turned away, and all night you would pray, truthful in every word you say. Muhammad, Ya Rasulallah, your face was brighter than the sun, your beauty equal by none. You are Allah's chosen one. Muhammad, khayru khalqillah. Sallu ala Rasulillah, Habib al-Mustafa. Peace be upon the messenger, the chosen one. I'll try to follow your way and do my best to live my life as you taught me. I pray to be close to you on that day and see you smile when you see me.
It is easiness in the chest acceptance in the mind, in you, to allow people to express themselves in ways that you know are not acceptable. And be patient as those of self-determination will, like the messengers have done. Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam exercised the best patience anyone could imagine.
Peace be upon the messenger, the chosen one. Sallu ala Rasul.